Hi, biology superstars. I wanted to make a video to go over some tricks and tips on how to tackle the paper two. So let's get started. As a reminder, your paper two is 44% of your IB grade. I'm going to see if I can get my pen going. Your paper two is 44% of your IB grade, whether you're in SL or HL. The difference is the amount of time that they allow you to sit the exam. So SL, it's an hour and a half. HL, it's 2 hours and a half. And that is primarily because the amount of marks that you are addressing in the exam is pretty different. SL, it's out of 50 marks, and HL, it's out of 80 marks. The extended response questions are 16 points out of 50 on the SL exam, and the extended response section B is 32 points out of 80 on the HL exam. And the rest of the points on each of those come from database and short answer questions. So 50 minus 16 is 34 here, and 80 minus 32 is 48 here. So in this video, we're going to go over both of the sections of the exam and some tricks and tips on how to sort of maximize your point values, no matter what part of the exam you're looking at. All right, so first thing is the database question. There is now a database question also in the paper one, but the paper two database question feels a little bit different. Primarily, they're giving you data about a hypothetical experiment that is like not something that you've necessarily addressed in your course content. And what they're really going to give you is like graphs that are full of data that they're going to want you to compare or draw conclusions from. Because it's going to be like hypothetical, something that you don't have any idea really what they're talking about, and you're just looking at the data and trying to draw conclusions based on the data and the written information they're presenting you with. These are some of the types of graphs that have come up historically on these database questions. A stacked bar graph is like this one right here. And remember, this is giving you total number of individuals while highlighting the breakdown of individuals of certain species. So like it doesn't have to be with species, but this one is like different types of birds in 3 locations. And you could be asked some analysis questions about like, which location has the most even distribution, which one seems to have the most skewed distribution, what are some reasons why this might be. It's really sort of critical thinking skills. But they do expect you to be familiar with all these types of graphs. So box and whiskers, the example of that is up here. I actually went over that in the paper one video, but this is sort of like a breakdown of what the basic values that you see in a box and whiskers are. I think most IB students are pretty familiar with these. Data over time comes up a lot because they want you to be like comparing stuff to each other. So it'll be like, this bacteria is growing at different rates in these different environments, like day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, and then a different bacteria is growing at a different rate. Why might this difference be occurring if they're in the same environment? So like critical thinking about which is the optimal bacteria for the environment. And I also definitely see error bars come up on database questions on paper 2, and error bars are always like just indicating that there is some variability in the data. So the bigger the error bars, the more variability. That's variability. Variability. And so, yeah, they'll ask a bunch of different kinds of questions about the data they're presenting you with. A lot of them seem, or like two-thirds of them, I'd say, seem pretty skill related. So, being able to calculate stuff, for example, like knowing how to calculate a percent is helpful here. Remember, that's part over whole times 100. So whatever the part value is over the whole value times 100, that gives you a percent. People are probably pretty familiar with that. Also, percent change comes up a lot. So to calculate a percent change, I'll go over here for this. You want this triangle is change, the delta sign. To calculate percent change, you want to do the new value minus the original value divided by the original value times 100. And you can sort of use your like common sense here in terms of percent change. Remember, percent change can be negative or positive. What other calculation things come up? Asking for like, a certain value on a certain day if you're looking at data over time, or like a max min value. Remember, you are allowed to have a calculator, so don't let anything about these numbers intimidate you. But basically, yeah, just how to like read a graph and get information out of it is important in the database questions. And there also definitely some it's likely that they'll ask you to compare and contrast results between different experimental groups they're showing you, because they want you to, my understanding of it is like they really want students to demonstrate that they are able to look at a graph and understand what it's telling them. And how results that it might be telling them are different from each other. So I see compare and contrast. And then also, like, a lot of times at the end of this type of database question, they'll ask you to like justify or evaluate a hypothesis or like a set of data. So, like, looking at all the data together, justify a conclusion, use information that they are giving you to say why that is a correct conclusion, or evaluate, which, remember, means that you need to give strengths and weaknesses, strengths and drawbacks or limitations to the argument. So those command terms come up a lot. We'll go over some of these command terms at the very end, like sort of the top 5 that you might see, and how to make sure you're addressing all that you can, like out of what they're asking you to do. But that's the database question in the paper too. These seem to be ranging from like, 9 points on an SL exam to 15-ish points on an HL exam. So this is like not an insignificant amount of points on the test. So do like flip through these and take it seriously. All right. And then you have other short answer questions, and these are just content. Like, a lot of times they'll give you a picture, like here's a food web, obviously. They could ask you to find like individuals at different trophic levels in the food web. They could ask you to define the diet, like omnivore, carnivore, herbivore, talk about producers, talk about like the process that is pictured here when the sun is going into this. This should say, this isn't an consumer, this is a producer, whatever. And so, like, they'll show you a picture and then ask you a bunch of questions, content from all over the place about the picture. Water molecule, bunch of stuff they can ask about water, like everything from how it supports life to how does it behave, what are its properties, what are examples of marine-based organisms. So, like, what's the positive and where are the positive and negative charges found in this molecule? So they could like start with a picture like this and then really get pretty deep in 6 to 8 points worth of content about how is this image related to all of the content that you studied in the whole course. Intercostal muscles, antagonistic muscle pairs, muscles in general, motility, like they'll show you one image and then sort of build on it in terms of relating it to a bunch of different content from the syllabus. So be ready for that. Some of them are just like short response questions. This is where, like, if you feel really like you're really studied, hopefully you'll see stuff here that you're like, oh, boom, I know the answer to this, no problem. All right, and then we have the section B, long response. So again, this is in SL, a 16-point question. You respond to one prompt, which is going to have 3 parts. It'll have an A part, a B part, and a C part. It is important in your answer to say when you are responding to the A part, the B part, and the C part, and don't write them all together. Like, you want to separately respond to each part of the prompt. So the actual questions will be worth 15 points. It seems like a lot of times in the new syllabus, there's 2 4-point questions and a 7-point question, but historically, they can split it up other ways also. And you'll notice that, so like this adds up to 15. There's 1 point available for the construction of your response. In HL, there are 2 questions that you answer 3 parts of. So that's 30 points worth of response, and then 2 points, 1 for the construction of each response. Construction of response, like, they're a little bit, I think the idea is like a little bit vague about exactly what that means. It can be anything from like writing in full sentences to having thoughtful structure in your answer. Under the old syllabus, it started to sort of mean like connecting the different parts of your response, like connecting your response in A to your response in B to your response in C. I don't know that that has like carried over really into the new syllabus, but basically, like, if you're writing well, you will hopefully probably get the point for construction of response. These long response questions usually start with some sort of like arcane statement about science, like biology is the study of life. Describe how cladograms are used to show evolution in biology. And then you want to just like say 4 things about how cladograms are used to show evolution in living things. Another sort of shorter response prompt is to outline. So like outline diversity of life in the 3 kingdoms of life. That means you want to like state what the 3 kingdoms of life are, talk a little bit about the differences between them. And then the long response part of it, like the big point question, is usually an explain question. And this means you want to give reasons for how things are related, and you definitely want to try to use the word because. So like in this example of biology being the study of life, maybe you're talking about like explain the relationship between water and life. So like you could say a bunch of stuff about water, and then you could like define living things, and then you could say how they're related, like water is important for life because, and then give some reasons. Relationship. And I think, the other thing I would say about these questions is if it is a 7-point question, try to provide around 10 points of information that you think will match up with the mark scheme. If it is a 4-point question, try to provide about 6 points of information that you think will match up with the mark scheme. I would encourage you to underline where you think you're providing good information, because it might help your grader to, like, they don't have to give you a point where you've underlined, but it generally sort of It's the mark of like a prepared student and a well-organized thinker if you're underlining your response where you think you're getting points. And there's no like the IB, the markers don't care if you do that or not. So if you're in the practice of doing that, I would encourage you to do that. I think it's a good idea. All right, and then that's it. That's all she wrote after section B. Be mindful of your time. This paper of the examination session it's usually enough time, but like you want to keep an eye on it. Try to go about 90 seconds a point, at least for the first run through. Use your reading time and look for the command terms that they're giving you. So like, for example, here are some ones that I think come up. Calculate. These are usually 2-point questions, and that's because they want you to show your work. There's like a point for showing work. There's sometimes a point for units. Always, if they are giving you units, put units in your response. Show work, units, and then a point, obviously, for the right answer. But calculate means like, showing your work, figure out an answer to like a mathematical type of a question. A lot of times compare and contrast or distinguish come up. Compare is similarities, contrast is differences, distinguish is differences. So make sure, especially if all they're asking you to do is distinguish, that you are giving differences about the two things that they are asking you about. Evaluate and discuss I put together because this is like they're asking you for benefits and drawbacks or like positives and negatives about the answer. So you want to present multiple perspectives in your response. And there's only a certain amount of points that you can get from doing only one of those things. So like if they ask you to evaluate a hypothesis and you only say why the hypothesis might be right, you'll max out at like 2 out of 4 points. So you want to make sure that you understand what these command terms are asking you to do. Describe is great because that's just like list steps or like, sort of give a chain of information about a topic. And explain, you want to use that word because you want to give the reasons why things are related or important. So since this whole exam is writing, make sure that you are paying attention to the things that they're asking you to write about. These command terms are important. Spend 5 minutes going over them before you walk into your IB exams. And good luck on your test.